Catus Maximus here, this time with a Bemis Call adjustable wrench, Crescent style. Bemis Call, and interesting little side note, this advertised as a 10-inch, it's a little bit shorter, but it doesn't say Forged in USA or anything, it just says B&C, and that's how you know it's a Bemis Call. At least with this particular tool. And it is an double extra wide jaw opening. That's one thing that really sets this apart, is we have almost basically 1 7/8 inch jaw opening on a 10-inch Crescent wrench. Here we have like an older American-made Craftsman here. Same thing, 10-inch class wrench. A little bit longer than 10 inches when you measure it overall. But something considered standard would be, in this case, it's just about 1 1/4 inches. So this, that's one thing. For a 10-inch wrench, it does have extra wide jaws, and they do, or extra wide as well as open, to have a huge capacity. But getting more to the point, this wrench is probably 100 years old. And so it seems right around 1915 is when Bemis Call introduced their Crescent style ones. They did have some that had a kind of a S handle, so it came up like this, which is kind of an interesting idea. Anyway, as we can see, it's just, this really stands out as something kind of unique. Being prior to the 1930s, and I was evaluating this, particularly this right here, there is quite a bit of dinging and damage. I mean, it's a 100-year-old wrench, and it actually has done some work. Don't believe it's chrome vanadium. I think this was forged before chrome vanadium, so this is some type of steel, alloy steel, but not chrome molybdenum or chrome vanadium or other well-known tool steels, which might explain some things. You know, the handle, unfortunately this one's a little bit bent, probably got run over at some point, but nonetheless, the handle I do like, super extra wide, but probably to add a little bit of extra strength. The other thing that we'll notice here, besides the unbelievably wide jaw opening, is that the thumb screw is like huge. Standard Crescent wrench uses basically a, it's a 4-3, so it's 4 and a slight overlapping area, but it's a 3-thread buttress. These are a little bit thinner, but there's 6 of the darn things in there. Even though this is all rusty and funky, the jaw has some play, but it's actually not that bad considering how much use the wrench has. I was going to point out something. One of which is when you close it and use it, and maybe you're using it to bend a piece of sheet metal or something, is that there's a big old stem that sticks out the back of the wrench, and it's a little bit dinged up on this one here. You can just see that where somebody is, of course, used it as a hammer. But that's the other striking thing. Both of these are 10-inch wrenches. Here's the little keyway for that standard among Crescent wrenches, and you can see this huge, I mean, this beam is massive, and that may be just to make sure it's strong enough, considering that the grades of steel when this was made, quite literally 110 years ago, or almost 110 years ago, they just had to overbuild it, so they just had to have a super extra thick beam with a big eye slot just to provide some extra support. I think the weakest part of the wrench here is right through there. I mean, there's a decent cross-section of steel there, and it's maybe 3/16 of an inch thick. Actually pretty even grinding, it's pretty well centered. But nonetheless, this section is going to be the weakest. Where on a Crescent wrench, they have this angle. Some are sharper, to tell you the truth, but ones that have this angle just gives a bit of extra steel here on what's known as the fixed jaw. But as far as the moving jaw is concerned, they also do it at an angle just because there's a larger triangle of steel, and it actually provides just a bit stronger of a jaw while having, for the amount of materials, what I'm trying to say. Where on this, they just had to throw just a ton of steel at it, even though it's really squared off, so there's going to be a big stress riser right here. This angle here actually helps distribute the load and is a little bit better design of engineering. But besides that, I'm getting all flustered for words here, because this thing is just so funky. It caught my eye on the shelf. I was like, that looks like a funky wrench. That has a huge thumb wheel. And it turns out it's a Bemis Call. They were really known for making high quality linear automotive wrenches. The old style wrenches, whenever there's like a graphic or something. I've done videos on them. I don't even know where any of them are. But the ones with the jaws move, they're kind of like a pipe wrench, but the jaw moves up and down the handle itself. Bemis Call is known for making some very high quality versions of what would be considered the antique late 1800s, early 1900s adjustable wrenches before the Crescent style took over. And so it's interesting to see this company kind of progress into the era of Crescent style wrenches, 22-degree head, and you know, their take on it, they weren't as good as the actual Crescent design. That's why the Crescent design became a standard. But still, you don't see them very often. It is cool to find a hand tool that's been around for over a century, or at least a century. Maybe this was made in 1924 rather than being one of the first of they were introduced in 1915. So it's just kind of interesting to hold a wrench that has a century's worth of history on it and that it works. I mean, it's a piece of forged steel. I mean, technically the lifespan could be nearly indefinite. But complex hand tools are just, especially cool ones like this, just aren't that easy to find. And I can actually see, I was just noticing, you can see how everything's pretty even, but you see this whole section where all these threads, all in a row, all have like a little bit of rounding or damage that's particularly shifted up on the top side. So that would be pretty unlikely, like in a toolbox, when it seems is that was the position that the thumb screw was in whenever somebody did a heavy-duty torquing action, whatever probably caused these really deep indentations. So it kind of goes to show that they actually had a reason to have 6 threads. Since this thumb screw probably wasn't super strong, they may have actually tried smaller screws like 3 threads and actually had them strip out. So their answer was put in a monster 6-thread wheel. Anyway, kind of a cool old adjustable wrench, and it's interesting to see the take that they had on it, which is kind of a stubby wide handle, but to have just an absolutely ridiculous jaw capacity. It's kind of like those old antique style, jaw moving on the handle wrenches, because those also were known for having just the most ridiculous jaw capacities. And so it's kind of a hark back to that. I mean, it's just hilarious to have a little wrench like this. There's Diamond Cock and Horseshoe Company made some Crescent style adjustable wrenches that were advertised, even had the words forged into the handle, wide jaw. But this is a wide jaw. I mean, it's so ridiculous that if you actually use really large fasteners, that the jaws can't even reach all the way up to the top of the face. This fastener here, this is like 1.5 inches or 1 5/8 inches, and I mean, it's just kind of absurd to have it's like a adjustable service wrench if you're using it on giant fasteners, and that actually may be an advantage to it. Is service wrenches are just large size, short-handled wrenches just for loosening and tightening larger fasteners, but not torquing them or breaking them free. It's just to work with them so you don't have, because large fasteners need heavy tooling, and once you've actually broken the tension off the bolt, the heavy tooling becomes cumbersome, and so they have service wrenches for you to manipulate the fasteners when they are not in a cinched state, and that's essentially what this little hand wrench is. And I'm pretty happy with it. Just wanted to kind of make a more detailed video about one of these because, I'm sure Bemis Call sold a whole bunch of them, but it's just surprising. Once hand tools start getting around that 100-year age, it's just, they start becoming a lot less common. Probably because a lot of people are like, oh, it's an old antique tool, and they end up throwing them away or recycling them. Anyway, thanks for watching.